For the first time in a while, it's pretty much safe to say that the standard model iPhone 15s doesn't feel miles away from their more pro siblings. So chances are that if you're watching this review, you've probably already decided that one, you don't want to spend more than $1,000 on an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max, and two, you don't care for pro cameras, a pro display, or a faster, more powerful chip, etc. You just want an iPhone with good battery that lasts the entire day and a camera that snaps good photos no matter the lighting conditions. Okay, well, let's talk about the iPhone 15. Let's just start by addressing the very first major new update to the entire iPhone 15 lineup here. And that's of course, finally, the switch to USB-C. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this long overdue update because it's already been well documented that Apple has made this switch ahead of enforcement by the EU. But it still doesn't feel any less novel. Now, I can't believe that I'm about to say this, but being able to charge my MacBook, my iPad, and now the iPhone is quite liberating, especially if you travel quite a bit. All you need now is just one cable. You should also know that the standard model iPhone 15 will support USB 2, which means transfer speeds are going to be more on the slow and limited side, whereas their Pro siblings support USB 3, and therefore that's going to mean faster data transfer speeds of up to 10 gigabits per second. Now, it might not be a big deal breaker for some, especially if you're the kind of person that's not transferring a lot of data to and from your phone, in which case you would have already opted for the Pro model. But what might be of more interest to you is the charging speeds and the battery performance. Now, the iPhone 15, both the smaller and the Plus model, have arguably one of the slower charging rates on a smartphone right now, topping out at 18 watts. So you'll definitely need at least a 20 watt adapter that will charge the iPhone 15 up to about 20% in around 30 minutes. But again, for convenience, I tend to use the same cable and 67 watt power adapter that I use to charge my MacBook, which took my iPhone 15 Plus from around 10% to about 50% in just around 20 minutes. Now, sadly, with the switch from Lightning to USB-C, there is no increase in charging speeds. Wireless MagSafe charging rate remains the same as before at around 15 watts, and standard Qi wireless rates are going to be around 7.5 watts. But where the battery life is concerned, the larger model, the iPhone 15 Plus, which is what I have here, you'll get about 30% more battery than the smaller base model. And that's really what Apple claims, as I wasn't able to test that model. But what I can definitely say for sure is that the iPhone 15 Plus is an absolute battery beast, lasting me easily and well into a second day before needing to charge. So naturally for me, how quickly the phone charges is, if I'm being honest, the very least of my worries. Design-wise, the iPhone 15 Plus looks nearly identical to the iPhone 14 Plus of last year. But if you look a bit closer, there are quite a few subtle and yet obvious differences. The biggest of these is that instead of the notch at the top of the display, you now get the much better dynamic island that was exclusive to the Pro model iPhone 14. Now, I've spoken on what this is in previous videos, so definitely go check those out if you want to know more. But for me, having used it for the very first time here on the iPhone 15 Plus to view various notifications, my connected accessories, to skip music tracks and so on without having to open the full app or go to the lock screen as I would on my previous iPhone that doesn't have the dynamic island, is very convenient. Now, it isn't a life-changing feature by any means, but it is certainly most definitely really nice to have. And when you're paying iPhone prices, the more nice to have features you have, the better, which you'll find is the kind of ongoing theme here in this review. But sticking to these subtle changes to the iPhone 15 Plus, the back glass. Now, Apple was not shy to announce that the back glass here on the 15 has been infused with color. While I'm not particularly sure what that means or how they did it and if it realistically should mean anything to you, what I can report is that the pink model, which by the way, quick note, is the one that I'm testing, not by choice, but my awesome girlfriend, shout outs to her, was really gracious enough to allow me to test it for a while. Well, this pink model has a delicate pale rose color on the rear with a matte milky finish, contrasting nicely with the slightly darker translucent pink housing for the camera module. These new standard iPhone 15s are available in 5 different colors, which are, to be honest, very muted, so it can be a hit or miss, but the pink colorway, in my opinion, is probably the best of all the 5 colors and looks really nice outside of a case. Now, I like the way it feels in the hand with nice contoured edges. It's smooth without being slippery, and fingerprints are definitely no issues here. And even though the Plus model is the bigger of the 2 standard model with the screen size of 6.7 inches, it feels really light as well, weighing just over 200 grams. As usual, the camera housing is perched up to the top left corner on the rear, with a pair of lenses arranged diagonally opposite each other, which looks pretty much the same as last year's model. Now, what also remains the same as last year is the display on the 15 Plus, which means we're getting a 60Hz Super XDR OLED display. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a good display for daily media consumption, but Apple is falling behind with what Android phones are offering for the same price, and even in some cases for less. Now look, I talked about the iPhone having nice things, but this is definitely one nice thing that the iPhone 15 doesn't have. Again, as I said, it's a good display, but at this price point, you can't help to feel that it could and should at the very least have a 90Hz refresh rate panel. Otherwise, the display here on the 15 Plus has pretty good color performance, really good viewing angles. It can reach peak brightness of up to 2000 nits, which is an improvement on last year's 14 Plus, which in my experience is pretty impressive. Of course, you're still dealing with some reflections in the screen, which isn't ideal when outdoors, but the brightness of the picture actually makes it easy to make out what's going on. So let me start by saying that it is still limited to 2 camera lenses on the rear, but this year, one of these lenses has gotten a lot more powerful. The main lens has jumped from a 12 megapixel to a 48 megapixel lens with a brighter aperture of f1.6. Now, I always like to remind persons not to fall trap or obsess about megapixel count, but this is a little bit different. Firstly, it's a really big increase, and second, it makes a functional difference with the addition of optical zoom. You see, because the 15 Plus's main lens is now operating at such a high resolution, it can effectively crop into the image without any noticeable loss of quality, which means you can actually get 0.5x, 1x, and 2x zoom. Now, I use the 2x zoom a lot in my testing, and I'm pretty impressed with its quality. Somehow, it feels like a natural option when taking photos of anything smaller than a building. So for capturing photos of people, animals, flowers, the 2x zoom to me works best. What's also new and a nice feature is that the iPhone 15 Plus enables portrait mode by default whenever the camera senses there's a person or a pet in the frame. Now, I get to understand that it's able to do this through depth sensors in the camera array that can tell immediately whether or not you're capturing a person. The phone does seem to make the assumption out of the box that you actually want portrait mode by default, so why not? It's pretty surprising though to see how immediate it is in practice. Video is also better, benefiting of course from the new sensor to produce more vivid contrasty footage. You can still record in 4K at up to 60 frames per second, fully stabilized. You still get cinematic mode, which can also record in 4K at up to 30 frames per second, and also action mode to give even more steadier footage at 2.8K at up to 60 frames per second. Now, the front selfie camera gets a 12 megapixel true depth camera, which is essentially the same camera as last year. It's good enough to get great selfies and of course portrait mode remains the highlight of any iPhone. In all, the new iPhone 15 Plus is a decent step forward from the camera in last year's model. Aside from the lack of that optical telephoto lens, it's actually pretty close to the pro camera that it has ever been before. So the 15 Plus is equipped with the A16 Bionic chip, which was the chipset used in last year's Pro model iPhones. And don't be fooled, it's still an extremely fast and future-proofed piece of silicon. Now, in my somewhat subjective, non-scientific tests, this 15 Plus with 6 GB of RAM performed at top level. Now, every app that I tried, no problem. Multitasking without slowing down. Most gameplay was outstanding, even with everything set to the very highest levels. Yeah, you won't have any problems here with the performance. On the subject of heat, I know that there were some concerns over heat buildup issues that seems to span the entire iPhone 15 line. Well, I can say I didn't run into this issue during my time testing, so it seems thankfully that this issue was resolved via software updates. And speaking of software, the iPhone 15 Plus comes with iOS 17 straight out the box, which helps to enhance the user experience here on the 15 Plus. Now, features like contact posters, name drop, real-time location sharing, interactive widgets, FaceTime messages, and heaps more are just very welcome features and will feel completely familiar to most iPhone users. But the most important aspect of the software is that Apple will support it for years to come. 5 years to be specific. So it's pretty much safe to say that the iPhone 15 Plus should age quite gracefully. So with all that said, my time with the iPhone 15 Plus has been really good. It's always easy to call the standard iPhone models the best iPhone for most people, which actually still holds true, but only this time that I'm actually finding myself recommending the non-Pro iPhones to more users than ever before. And that's actually because I think Apple's made just enough feature upgrades, even though there's still quite a few that they could have brought to us that could be a deal breaker. But hey, I still think it's good enough to help the latest standard iPhone 15 models here stand out and proud this time around. But yeah, that's it for this one. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and if you haven't subscribed, there's a subscribe button down below. Smash that subscribe button. Join this awesome community. Remember to leave a like on the video here if you enjoyed it and found it useful. That just helps the channel out a lot and help me to reach other persons. Thanks so much for the support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys again in my next video.